Okay.
Yeah.
It definitely takes a while to do it. I think it's because I'm doing two different accounts.
Well, I'm in the
Now it's
WPS.
Yeah,
Oh, we
now
are?
it's live. Yeah, we're live.
We are.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Because it's because I have to use two different accounts, I think.
It's not live on YouTube yet.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's live on YouTube.
Call this meeting to order. At this time, we vote to go into closed session for discussion and/or action regarding those items of business exempt from open meetings under general laws of Rhode Island, 42-46-5, A1, A2, A4, A8, and A9.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Guys have it. We're in executive.
Before we sign off, I would simply say that any individuals to be discussed have been so notified.
Thank
Correct.
you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And my cat keeps walking across my keyboard. She's like she doesn't want to be on the camera, but she is just cut me off twice.
I used to have a cat that liked to walk on the keyboard. She wanted to be the mouse. Or she thought that she wanted to play with the mouse. Hello, Dr. Cecil.
Hi. I
Hi.
fixed my other video screen. I had to change computers because the video wasn't working on my other laptop, but got it working again. We're back in business.
Very good.
I'll shut this one down.
One minute to live.
Technically, we are live now.
We are. Just waiting for a few more people. Is Dr. Conley here?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay.
me now?
Yeah, I was having trouble with my mic, but yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So return to open session. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. David, if you'll lead us, please.
I pledge allegiance to the
Allegiance.
flag
Flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. Well done. At this time, I'd ask for a motion to seal the minutes of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. There were no votes taken in executive session. Public comment. Ms. Bonan? Oh, anyone wishing to make a public comment may do so by writing, by email written comments to publiccomment@warwickschools.org. Please submit your comments by noon of the meeting day in order to ensure receipt. Now, Ms. Bonan.
Madam Chair, I have 10 public comments this evening. I have one from Mr. J. Leslie, or Jason Leslie. During the 7/16 meeting, Dr. Thornton mentioned Mondays are planned to be virtual learning days, including days that are staff development days. If students are required to do virtual learning on staff development days, will the school calendar going to be shortened? I have this one's from Pamela Jones. Why can't the parents of students choose whether they send their children back to school or choose distance learning like other states are doing? If the decision is made to send kids back to school, I will be homeschooling my child. It's not safe to send children back to school at this time. The kids may not get that sick, but they are going to bring the virus home to people who can get very sick from COVID-19. This is from Jessica Greenberg. I am a science teacher at Tollgate High School with 3 little kids going to school in another district. If my kids have to be quarantined due to illness in their class or daycare, and I have to be out of work for that time, do I have to take unpaid days? Can I use FMLA? This is from Linda Pixenio. Good morning. Could you please explain the expectations the school committee has for students, teachers, and cleaning staff on Mondays that are considered PD cleaning? This is from the Bailey family. Members of the Warwick School Committee, as a parent of 2 secondary school students, I have several concerns regarding the plans to reopen our schools. It's been mentioned several times that Warwick Public School staff would be unable to enforce a mandatory mask policy, yet they are perfectly able to enforce a dress code. Students are sent home for inappropriate attire. Why not use the same policy for masks? Teams are currently practicing for fall sports, yet the coaches are not wearing masks and social distancing is not being enforced when students are on the sidelines. Is this lack of attention to safety what we can expect when students are in classrooms? If a child does come home in contact with someone that has COVID-19, how quickly will Warwick Public Schools contact the parents? Every parent and teacher needs to be notified the same day that the school is made aware of the potential contact. How are parents being penalized if they send an exposed child to school? Within the last month, a recreational sports league had to cancel its season. One of the immediate family members of a player was hospitalized due to COVID-19, yet their child kept coming to the games in spite of being knowingly exposed to COVID-19. What are parents' legal repercussions if their child becomes exposed in school? Medical bills relating to COVID-19 can be astronomical, especially if hospitalization is required. If it's determined that the exposure was due to lax enforcement of mask, social distancing, or sanitation policies, is Warwick Public Schools prepared to cover the medical expenses that result from this lapse? What if the exposure is because a parent knowingly sent an exposed child to school, similar to the above example? Do you know what options parents have to seek damages from that parent in order to cover potential medical expenses? I know there are no easy answers and that these are questions we never thought we would have to answer. Although these questions are difficult, it is imperative that they are answered. Parents need this information in order to make the best choices for their children. Sincerely, the Bailey family. This is from Chris Plant. What will the protocol be when one or more students, teachers tests positive? Will the school be shut down? Will only some be denied entry? Who will enforce? This is from Catherine Newman. Dear members of the school committee and administration, after reviewing the budget and thinking seriously about reopening, I have a few questions I would like to ask and have answered. Most of my questions are based on the high school, as that is the level with which I am most familiar. If in school, will there be barriers, plexiglass, etc., between teachers and students, between students? But I do not see plexiglass or other types of barriers mentioned for regular classrooms in the budget. If not, how do you plan to keep teachers and students safe besides masks and social distancing? Is that enough, especially when high school teachers are exposed to more than just small pods of students who have not been contained in one classroom? What is distancing furniture as referenced in the budget, and where will it be located or used? How are classrooms going to be cleaned between classes, and who bears the cost of the cleaners? Will custodians enter each classroom and disinfect the area students just vacated before the next class of students enter the classroom, especially in high school, or are you expecting teachers to do that? How are bathrooms going to be continuously cleaned? Will there be toilet seat covers installed in all bathrooms to reduce the spread of germs? What happens when PPE and sanitizing supplies run out? Will these supplies be purchased well enough in advance to always have a supply? Have you sent a survey to all student households for parents, guardians to answer relative to whether or not they will send their children back to school? If so, what is the percentage who say no, they will not have their children return to the physical building? What is the plan for students who do not return and who will require distance learning? What makes full and hybrid learning so different? Students and teachers are still exposed by entering the building, whether it was for 2 days, 4 days, or 5 days per week. What is the difference in exposure? Do you believe you can sanitize and clean the building safely numerous times a day in order to reduce infection? If so, what is the plan? MLB has the capacity for testing every day, and everyone and they cannot keep their team safe from the virus. Just 3 games into the season, teams had to cancel games due to a high number of athletes, coaches, staff being diagnosed with COVID-19. One of the Red Sox pitchers is suffering from heart problems as a result of COVID-19, and he is in excellent physical condition. How are you going to keep students, faculty, and staff safe if they return to school? The closer it gets to school opening, the more nervous I become, and I know others, parents and teachers, who feel the same. If you think it is safe to be together, why aren't you together? You are a small pod. As I ask that, I'm not criticizing you and want you to understand that I believe you are taking the correct action by staying home and working from home. But as you are the ones to make the decision, I want you to remember that students and teachers will be the ones exposing themselves by entering the school buildings. I know how important it is for children to be in front of a teacher in the same room. I love being with my students each day. It is what makes me come back each year. The interaction is essential, but I must ask, at what cost? This is such a difficult time in all of our lives. I want you to consider whether or not it is better to sacrifice now for the health and safety of our students and staff going forward, or to open and find ourselves in a situation that results in sickness or worse, and a possible return to distance learning in the long run. Thank you for your attention and for your continued work for our community. This is from Kate Chassie. I have some concerns about how the coronavirus will be handled. How will students properly wearing masks be enforced and disciplined? Who will be responsible for cleaning the classrooms between groups of students? What assurances do we have that a full custodial staff will be present and will clean every room thoroughly every night, when for the last few years this has been a major issue? What occurs when a student in a class tests positive? Do all students in classes with them need to quarantine? Are we relying on parents to monitor for symptoms? Piggybacking on that, what happens if a teacher needs to quarantine or test positive? How will social distancing be enforced in the lunch line for food between classes and in common areas? Thank you for addressing these concerns. This is from Heather Pruitt. I am a mother of 4 Warwick school children. They attend 3 different schools, Robertson, Windman, and Tollgate. My worries and concerns continue to grow regarding the opening of schools. Not only am I a mother, but I'm also a registered nurse. There are a few concerns I would like you to consider while contemplating the reopenings. I do not believe that there is enough protection for all students and teachers. Too many children and adults are asymptomatic and may be spreading COVID-19 without even knowing they are infected. Is each classroom going to have plexiglass or other barriers between students and teachers? As I research other successful countries, they have these precautions in place and they have the virus under control, unlike the United States. Just today, a Palm Beach, Florida doctor reported a 34% increase of children diagnosed with COVID-19 and 330 children in the hospital, a 23% increase. As you know, we learn more each day about this horrific virus and cannot assume that children will not be affected or affect others. MLB is a prime example of how this disease cannot be contained completely in the best scenarios. They have testing for everyone every day and cannot keep their teams free of the virus spreading. Transportation. This is a very concerning aspect of returning to school. Busing our students in what capacity and what safety measures will be in place. How can one actually stagger timeframes appropriately with entering and exiting schools with drop-offs by buses. Should we seriously consider distance learning to begin the school year and reassess each month on opening the schools? This would allow for all buildings to be updated with full safety precautions. I understand that in-person is the best scenario, but that may not be the case now. Thank you for attention and consideration. This is from Mary Tao. Having read the RIDE guidelines for reopening schools, I am extremely concerned to see that masks are not required. Right now, any classroom situation would involve risk. Even if masks were to be worn due to enclosed, poorly ventilated spaces, extended duration of time, and the inability of many to keep masks on properly. Seeing how this virus has spread and has resurged in places that have loosened restrictions, wouldn't it be more prudent to take it a few weeks at a time and come back when it is safe for all, students as well as staff? Thank you. That's all I have.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you, Ms. Bonin. This time, school committee correspondence and donation announcements. There are none. Announcements, personnel as presented. Ms. Ruggieri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. We have 3 administrative appointments tonight. I'd like to welcome Cameron Berube to our team as the Curriculum Technology Coordinator. And we also have 2 current employees that are moving. We have Marilyn Feeney moving to Assistant Principal of Teaching and Learning at Windman Middle School, and Lisa Schultz as Elementary Principal at Park Elementary.
Welcome to Ms. Berube, and good luck to Ms. Schultz and Ms. Feeney. Thank you. Adoption of policies, GBE, Health and Safety, first reading, and JHCC, Communicable Diseases, first reading. These 2 go hand in hand pretty much. Dr. Cecil.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. GBE is the policy that we are amending to include language about mandatory use of masks in the building. And because this is so important and new, I would ask if you have a copy, Madam Chair, do you want to read it? Or Ms. Cobden, or would you like me to read it?
Have a copy.
Go ahead and read.
File GBE, Staff Health and Safety. The committee will seek to ensure the safety of all employees during work hours and assist all employees in the maintenance of good health. AIDS. The school committee is committed to the goal of maintaining a healthful environment for all of its employees. The fulfillment of this provision involves the approval and monitoring of guidelines established by the superintendent concerning the employment of personnel infected with AIDS, COVID-19, in order to provide for an effective developmental and educational environment and to ensure the safety of teachers, students, and staff. The Warwick School Committee will require all persons inside of the Warwick Public Schools facility to wear a mask. This includes adults, including educators and staff, and students age 2 and above. Masks or face coverings must also be worn by all students on the bus. The same applies to staff with medical or other health reasons for being unable to wear face coverings. Face shields worn in place of face covering must extend below the chin and back to the ears. A student may take off a mask when it is approved by a teacher or a school administrator. Students with special needs, documented as in an individualized education plan, IEP, or 504, may be accommodated or exempted from this mandate at the recommendation of the IEP or 504 case manager in consultation with the parent. Students with medical conditions as documented in an individual healthcare plan, IHCP, may be accommodated or exempt from this mandate with a doctor's note in consultation with the school nurse. A release must also be signed in the event that the school nurse or school physician needs to consult with the student's doctor. Any staff member with a medical condition that prohibits the use of any type of face covering must provide a doctor's order and may be asked to sign a release to allow the school nurse or school physician to speak to their healthcare provider. The required use of masks will remain in effect until the school committee ends this requirement.
I'm recommending approval of this first read.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion, right? I'm going to make a motion on this, right?
Yes.
Second.
Discussion,
Discussion.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Todd.
Just one thing that that's a concern to me that it might have been missed. I'm not sure if I missed it. When describing the proper procedure to wear a mask, it says just to extend past the chin, but it doesn't talk about covering the nose. I just want to make sure that covering mouth and nose is included in there.
I'll add that language.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cecil. Do we need to add anything for sports? COVID and sports are very big right now, so.
Well, Madam Chair, I get your question. What I don't know is, do we know what sports are even going to be running yet?
Well,
Right. So I'm not sure if we can incorporate like an overall mask in sports, because I guess it would vary from from some sports to others.
I agree. Mr. Dr. Thornton?
Yes, I agree with Mr. Tasker. Right now, sports are an open question. We don't even know if we're going to run sports this fall. It would probably fall under a different area, and it really would be sports specific. But yes, sports are an open question.
Thank you. Mr. Tesla?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions. Mr. Rath, to your point, I think you were reading what the requirements of a face shield were, but we did all get an email from a teacher today or yesterday where the policy doesn't define what wearing a mask is, right? Wearing a mask we should specify that to cover the nose and the mouth, because someone who wears it around the neck could say, technically, I'm wearing a mask. So I think we need to clarify that a little bit. And I know we're going to allow face shields in some instances. My understanding was, I thought Department of Health's guidance was a face shield alone isn't satisfactory. It needs to be accompanied by a mask. So we can make an exception to that, Mr. Hennius?
So based on what the governor said today, I'm hoping we may get some additional guidance on that particular issue prior to the governor's statement. While the CDC has recognized that a face shield in and of itself isn't the same level of protection as a mask, don't forget the CDC wasn't requiring the use of masks as well. So my reading of the intent behind this policy is if someone is medically unable to wear a mask, then at least the face shield provides some level of protection, better than none, in other words. But it will be interesting to see how and if the governor's new position on this changes that.
Okay. Also, when in the paragraph that deals with students with special needs, if the IEP says they can't wear a mask or whatever that is, could we require that same student to wear a face shield?
Madam Chair,
That's yep. Dr. Conley.
I would suspect that most of the students who won't wear face masks won't tolerate anything on their head. They have sensory issues, autism, they won't wear hats, they won't wear Band-Aids. I left it open that the case manager would consult with the parent because both of them know the student best and know what is a reasonable expectation for those students. So certainly if we do have a student who wouldn't wear a mask but could wear a face shield, we would do that. But I don't think it's going to be 100% of those kids would willingly wear a face shield.
Thank you, Dr. Connolly. I just have 2 more questions.
Just a tester, just to weigh in on that. They will all be reviewed individually in those situations, and some sort of decision and plan will be put in place.
Thank you. If I remember, RIDE's guidance does call for mask breaks, right? Especially at the elementary level, right? So that was a concern with some of the public comment and some emails we got where, okay, how do we take a break from masks? But I believe that RIDE's guidance does spell out that students need to have mask breaks. So we should be able to have that as part of the school day.
And our reopening plans do have mask breaks in them for all students.
Okay.
And this policy says that they may take it off when it's approved by a teacher or administrator.
Right, and that leads me to my other question. Yes, but it's whenever they take the mask off, we still have to make sure we're complying with whatever the guidelines are, right? We just can't have, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that will, Dr. Cecil and I talked about this. That's going to then fall on the shoulders of the administration to instruct administrators and staff as to when those non-mask situations can occur. That's correct.
Right. That's a lot to put on a teacher or staff member to say, oh, you can take your mask off. So
absolutely not. The best suggestion would be some kind of formal written guidance as to under what scenarios it may be appropriate, to ask a student to remove a mask.
Okay, and the final question I have is, what do we do with the student who wants to be a wiseacre and decide I'm not wearing a mask? I'm gonna take it off on my own, right? So they'd be breaking a rule just like they would if they took their T-shirt off and wanted to walk around bare-chested. We wouldn't allow that, right? So we need to have something developed to address that.
We do, David, Mr. Testa. That student will be disciplined, and they will be in virtual education for some period of time, or distance learning, if you would, for some period of time until they can be more mature and serious about this very serious virus.
Thank you. I'm pleased with this. I really, really am. Thank you.
We felt it was necessary to do something. We did not feel that the governor's guidance per se was legitimate, and we felt that we can require students to wear masks in order to protect themselves and other people, and that's why we called a policy meeting to do just that. And Dr. Cecil has led us through this in a wonderful way, and I thank her for all her help on this. Ms. Cobden.
Yeah, my question is, I've gotten lost in all the conversation going back and forth, but there may be kids that don't have sensory issues. I agree with Dr. Conley 100%. We have kids that have issues, and that has to be addressed and dealt with properly, and not be penalized for that. But what about the kid whose parents buy him a face mask, one of the plastic shields, and says that's enough for him to wear? It is not enough for him to wear. They've proven that. They have to have an actual mask on. What are we going to do about that? If the kid has a shield on that isn't sensory problem and he's got no issues, but that's what he comes to school and because that's what the mother or father think is appropriate, he needs to have a covering over his face still. I'm worried about that.
One will be, we will have copious masks available for our students that don't have one. They'll be provided with one. If they don't wear it, then the school administrator will contact the parents and address it from there. If they have an IEP, it would be handled with the parents and arrangements made. And so of course we'll call the parents and look for input, let them know what the policy is.
I think I'm just with Mr. Testa because I've also gotten a bunch of inquiries about, people not following. How are we going to enforce it? Obviously, I'm on the policy committee too. I was involved in this, but especially today, I've gotten a lot of emails. So I just want to make it clear and have the discussion that people understand that there will be consequences. Thank you.
Yes, there will be consequences, and they will be in distance learning if they don't choose to wear a mask and don't have any other provisions, because we cannot allow people to get sick. It's irresponsible, and we have to do everything we can. If we can even go back to school at the end of August.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Adams.
I do have a question, but I guess I should ask Mr. Hennius first because just if I can ask it. Dave had brought up or Mr. Testa had brought up mask breaks. Would this be would I be able to ask about that here? Does it kind of, okay, I didn't know if it fell in line. All right. So I do know that when we talked about mask breaks before, it did involve going outside. Now in the event that December we haven't been forced to go back into distance learning, going outside is going to be a little hard. Do we have a plan of action for mask breaks in December, January, February?
When it gets cold out?
Yeah.
Superintendent, please.
Madam Chair, I think we would utilize the all-purpose room areas to give kids mask breaks for the common areas. If it's cold out, we'd certainly have to utilize the space we have and take turns.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Mr. Cornell. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Mr. Cornell.
Yeah, I think this policy is a good idea. Like, it's pretty much the only way we could ever go back to the schools right now is a full mandatory mask policy. It's for the safety of the students, and and I'm glad that this is being implemented. I read over language, and I'm also glad that there's certain a provision in there regarding the special ed students, because I know some have sensory issues and they won't be able to wear a mask. So I'm just glad that this policy is being implemented and it's well written. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cornell. At this time, I would move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. The second policy is JHCC, communicable diseases. Dr. Steve.
Yes, and so this we're also bringing for a first read. And this one is talking about the health of employees and students in the buildings and making sure that the environment itself, the school buildings themselves are safe, and about individuals' health. So again, I think it's important that this one get read allowed. So I turn it over to you, Ms. Backus.
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Cecil. File JHCC, communicable diseases, notification of communicable disease. Notification of the existence of a communicable disease in a school shall be disseminated to parents of students who attend such school at the direction of the school physician. His action will be accommodated in concert with the guidelines established by the Rhode Island State Department of Health, General Laws of Rhode Island, Chapters 21, 22, and 38, Title 16, Part 2, Health Services, and administrative personnel in charge of school health program. 8. The superintendent will initiate and maintain guidelines for schools concerning the education and attendance of children infected with the AIDS virus, human T lymphotic virus type 3, HTLV3, in accordance with the requirements established by the Rhode Island State Department of Health, General Laws of Rhode Island, Chapters 21, 22, and 38, Title 16, Part 2, Health Services, and the Board of Regents Basic Education Program, BEP standards. COVID-19. In an effort to maintain a safe and healthful school environment, the Warwick School Department shall provide information to students and staff regarding measures that shall be taken to reduce the risk of contracting or transmitting communicable diseases at school and during school-related activities. Students and district employees may be excluded from school and/or all school-related activities if they are suspected of, based on legitimate tracing and/or medically recognized practice, or diagnosed as having a communicable disease as determined by the Department of Health Services that poses a significant health risk to others, or that renders them unable to adequately perform their jobs or pursue their studies. Such decisions will be made on an individual basis and in consultation with one or more healthcare professionals. Students and employees excluded from school pursuant to this policy may appeal their exclusion as set forth in the Administrative Procedures Act implementing this policy. The district recognizes that an individual health status is personal and private. Therefore, the district shall handle information regarding students and district employees with suspected and/or confirmed communicable diseases in accordance with state and federal laws and board policies governing the confidentiality of student and staff health records. Schools may be closed for public health reasons by order of a public health officer or agency as law permits or as determined to be necessary by the superintendent.
I'm recommending approval of this first read.
I move approval of communicable diseases.
Second.
I'll second it.
Discussion? Is there any discussion on this? Superintendent?
I think it makes total sense to move on this policy to deal with the current pandemic that we're in.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this? The policy committee wanted to make sure that we covered our bases to keep everyone as safe as possible, and that's what these two policies do. Masks will be required in Warwick schools unless there is a medical issue or another issue that prevents that from happening, and in that case, another arrangement will be established for that individual. The Question is on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Cecil. New business. Discussion action, technology applications, curriculum coordinator contract. Who would like,
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we, let me get this right here, that we approve the contract for the technology application, the curriculum coordinator as presented in executive session.
executive session. Thank you
Second.
very much. Who seconded?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Adams and Ms. Cobden. Discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Discussion action, Warwick Area Career and Technology Director position,
I'm chair on number 2.
excuse me,
You're on number
superintendent
3.
contract. I'm always running ahead.
Okay.
Discussion action, superintendent contract.
Madam
maybe-
Chair, I make a motion that we approve a 1-year extension to the superintendent's contract with the agreed upon concessions as discussed in executive session.
Second. Discussion? There being none? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Opposed?
Nay.
4 in favor. Mr. Cornell opposed. Congratulations, Superintendent. Would you like to say something?
Now, just really briefly, I'd like to thank the committee for the 1-year extension. We certainly have a great deal of work to do in front of us with school opening and the pandemic. So that's certainly where our focus will be, but thank you for the extension.
Thank you, Superintendent. And thank you for the concessions and for sticking in there with us. Number 3, discussion action, Warwick Area Career and Technology Director position. We discussed this position and what we're going to do. It was decided that we do need someone to run the Career and Tech Center. We discussed a number of possibilities, and at this point, I think that we are going to put it out as an interim position. Is that correct? Mr. Jerry? Okay, so it'll go out shortly as an interim position, so anyone who is interested and already in the system, please get ready to send your CV. Thank you. Discussion action, substitute COVID-19 rate. Ms. Danbrook and Ms. Ruggiero.
Madam Chair, we
Ma-
skipped number 4.
Yes, we did. I keep running ahead. Number 4, discussion action, appoint conflict counsel, Rhode Island Council 94 et al. Versus Warwick School Committee et al. AC 2020-0566. At this time, we are looking to hire conflict counsel for the pension board so that there is no conflict between the school committee council and the pension committee council. So I'd make a motion to appoint Mr. Charlie Ruggiero as conflict counsel in this situation.
Second.
Discussion. There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you very much. Number 5, discussion action, substitute COVID-19 rate. Ms. Danbrook and Ms. Ruggiero.
Madam Chair, I'm recommending that we raise the daily rate of substitutes to $125 a day. We have a shortage of subs. We're competing with other districts, and I think it's very important to raise the daily amount.
Thank you, Ms. Danbrook. Ms. Ruggiero.
I'd also like to add that if we're able to move ahead with our COVID plan and hire building aides, those building aides would be making more than a teacher at this point. So I also recommend raising the daily rate to 125.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I move approval.
Second.
Discussion.
Madam Chair, I fully support this. It's going to be a highly competitive market for, it's been a highly competitive market for substitutes for a while. It's going to be more so in COVID world. And we have to pay a competitive rate, because otherwise we just won't get them. It's that simple. It's not rocket science. It's simple supply and demand.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Ms. Ruggiero.
I do have one question. Our current substitute rate starts out at 80 and then increases after a certain number of days. So I would just like to propose that we keep the same incremental increase if we do raise the rate. Otherwise, we may lose people after the 30 days if they can go to another district and make more money there.
Ms. Danbrook.
I totally agree with that.
Fine with me. I'm sorry. That was my mic was on. I'm sorry. Madam Chair, I would agree with that. We don't want to take one action to attract subs and another action to lose them. It just doesn't make sense.
I completely agree. One thing I'd like to ask is that we get something up on the web. I've heard from a couple of people who went looking for sub positions. Maybe we could have something up there on our own website that says, you know, substitutes wanted or something. Click this button to apply or what have you, so that people know that we're looking and that we'd like them to apply if they're so inclined.
Absolutely, we will work on that.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else? The matter has been motioned and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you very much. Number 6, discussion action, kindergarten teacher assistant request. Ms. Danbrook and Ms. Ruggiero.
Yes, Madam Chair, we added a third kindergarten to Cedar Hill School, and unfortunately, that TA position was not included in the personnel count for the 2021 school year. So we're requesting it at this point in time.
I move approval.
Second.
Discussion. I think we absolutely need a TA in the kindergarten. There being no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you very much. Warwick Schools reopening task force budget FY 2021. Mr. Ferrucci, good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee, fellow colleagues, Dr. Thornton. Last school committee meeting, the task force, the reopening task force committee chair, Ms. Danbrook, presented the plan for what was going to be submitted to the state of Rhode Island. Within that document was the task force subcommittee's budget for reopening. So this evening, we're going to just spend a few minutes digging a little deeper into what we project our needs are for reopening the schools the 1st of September. Just to back up a moment, the task force was comprised of, let me just check, make sure I get it right, 13 subcommittees, comprised of communications, the elementary, the secondary, facilities, human resources, community health and safety, preschool, social and emotional needs for our students, special education, teaching and learning, technology, transportation, school lunch, and finally finance. 12 of the subcommittees, as they built their plans for reopening, were giving the charge of also creating a budget to make that happen. As we all recall, there were 3 plans that were required. All students going back to schools, a hybrid style model, and then virtual learning. When the budget instructions went out to the subcommittees, they were asked to do the 3 plans and to also to provide whether it was mandatory need in order to accomplish that plan, whether there were additional needs that were really needed but not mandatory, and then finally the desired things that we needed. And so we were able to break down those costs across all of the subcommittees. So in essence, we ended up with close to 100 budget scenarios that came forward. In your packet, we have breakdowns at summary levels. We show what the subcommittees asked for. We show the subcommittees by the types of expenses. The predominant amount of expenses for the opening of schools dictated on staffing. In review of all the various guidance with regards to how often areas have to be cleaned, how to sustain space between students, the numbers of adults and student ratios, all were driving staffing costs. Requirements to have monitors on all buses so that the social distancing is maintained while the buses are being driven. Making sure students sit 1 per seat so that there's not a lot of contact during the bus routes. Contributed significantly to adding more monitors to buses, because typically monitors are only on at the elementary level where the small students may need assistance. So those kinds of things were built in to the budget scenarios that each had provided. There is a very detailed report within your package that breaks down the types of expenses that folks have embedded into their budgets. But I'm going to get back up to the 10,000 foot level and just put it in round numbers. The opening of schools and the demands in order to make the building safe, whether it be a full student or a hybrid model, the mandatory level of expenses of approximately $15 million. Stepping up to the next desired level, desired level would be additional $1 million to $2 million. If we went to what we really would like to have, that wish list, with upwards of $17 million. I'm going to stay in the $15 million basket for going back to school. If we went with virtual learning, where we didn't have the demands for staffing in the buildings, and we didn't have the demand for busing, we're looking at a baseline of about $4 million. So that's the range in which we're operating from a budget perspective. If you recall, on June 30th, the state took $1.4 million of state aid to the school department and said they were going to supplement that by having the CARES Act provide additional $1.4 million. We are in fact fortunate enough that we had a small surplus for the end of the year, June 30th, without that $1.4 million. So we did not budget that $1.4 million in the school's budget for FY21. So that 1.4 has been basically set aside and earmarked for reopening schools. Last July 16th, actually, school committee adopted a revised budget, which was predicated on operating schools as usual. and they made some severe cuts in order to balance that budget. And so the budget is currently balanced. There were no significant costs associated with opening schools under the pandemic model. So any expenses were about operating the schools as typical. So the instructions to the subcommittee is, if you have money budgeted in your local budget, do not put it into your second request. We didn't want to confuse the community. So the budget you had before you is not funded in our local budget whatsoever, okay? We have gotten guidance from the state of Rhode Island that they are waiting on the actions of the federal government with regards to a second stimulus. And as we know, there's a debate going on in Washington, D.C., that the stimulus package is going to fall somewhere between $1 trillion and $3 trillion. And depending on which package is approved and how much funding the state of Rhode Island receives, the state of Rhode Island will then determine how much state aid the school department will receive for the budget that we just passed as a revised budget. So we're still waiting to see if there's actually going to be a cut in our local budget. The assumption is that the local budget would not be harmed. So to date, the only other source of dollars that we are aware of is under the stimulus package 1, under the CARES Act. There is another $1.7 million coming forward to the school department. We have not been given guidance as of today by the state of Rhode Island how to access that $1.7 million. The only guidance we have had is how to access the $1.4 million. And Warwick Public Schools did convene a meeting of the task force leadership and wrote up the grant for the $1.4 million, and we started that process on Monday this week. Our focus was on the $15 million worth of startup costs necessary for the schools. And our focus was to invest in things that we would use whether the schools stay with students coming to the buildings or whether virtual learning is required. So it will be a wise investment for the district short term, and it will be a wise investment for the district long term. So out of the $15 million that's in front of you this evening, we have sought $1.4 million. Of that $1.4 million, $800,000 is going towards technology. We're looking at doing the Chromebook purchase of about $600,000 and all the ancillary supports of another $200,000. Technology had asked for $450,000 to support our computer labs. That was the one item that was not included in the $1.2 million request. The other categorical pieces were in support of special ed led the conversation about health and safety. And primary concern was getting PPEs for our staff folks within the buildings. So there's $100,000 targeted for PPE purchases right away. Facilities and the sanitizing agents that are necessary, we targeted $100,000 for facilities to take that and start the ball rolling. And lastly, our teaching and learning with regards to the type of electronic programming that we need, regardless of whether we are back 100%. We've all heard on snow days, students will learn from home. Hybrid, some portion of students will be home all the time. And even if a student doesn't come in, there's an expectation to provide at-home instruction. So we targeted the balance of that $1.2 million for curriculum. That's the categorical collection. Again, they're investments that will be utilized regardless of what type of programming we undertake. So we stand here this evening to say, best case scenario that I'm aware of right now is that our local budget will not be harmed. We will have another $1.7 million we will be able to submit budget requests for. And that still will then leave us, if the decision is made to open schools, approximately $12 million short. I don't have an answer for you. We need to advocate for the state. And when I shared this conversation with my fellow colleagues at a recent RIASBO meeting, they are all saying the same things. They are all saying Coventry in particular took a hit on state aid last year. They're in a much more dire situation than we are. And they're concerned about the loss of more state aid on their local budget, and they do not have funding to open schools. So it is a statewide issue. The lack of decision-making is impacting our ability to execute the things we need to do. Under normal conditions, when everything is up and running smoothly, typically, I would have all of our purchases ordered by now. Typically, it would take 3 to 5 weeks for delivery for any instructional materials we need in order to open up schools. So, given that this is an atypical situation and that folks are having difficulty even meeting demand on supplying products, never mind we're all going to be shopping for the same products, I cannot fathom how we can move forward with the schools opening in September and having everything in hand at this point in time. I'm sorry to report. Just typically based on our past practices, the logistics of getting products in and distributed is problematic. On top of that, I can't authorize purchasing anything until I get budget support from the state that the funds will be forthcoming. One other statistic that I do want to ferret out in the documents is the volume of staff that are needed. You'll see that under the human resources area, they're talking about building aides under the and teaching assistants and the facilities, because there's lots of public comments this evening about facilities and how we're going to keep them clean. Mr. Oliver has stated that he's looking for 80 additional staff. He's got it broken down, 41 more staff to be assigned to the 13 elementary schools, 14 more staff to the middle schools, and 25 more staff to the high schools. It's to meet the guidelines of going into restrooms and cleaning restrooms on a more sustained basis. It's to meet the guidelines of the high contact areas where the front doors come in and those types of things, where there's expectations of cleaning. There's a higher level of need when it comes to actually going into rooms at the end of a day and putting in the sprays that will sanitize classrooms properly. It does not include the time allowed or needed, for a high school class where the bell rings and all the students move between classrooms and getting into all the classrooms before the students go into the next class. I mean, you've got a 5-minute bell time. We cannot put enough physical bodies in a building to clean all the classrooms for the kids to move from one class to the next efficiently. So we are looking to add staff to meet the guidelines. It's 80. We had asked Ms. Ruggieri to post the positions to at least start recruiting. Even without budget, at least we could go forward recruiting and see how many folks would be interested in joining the school department, and then hope the budget would come along, and then we would proceed. At least we would have a pool of candidates to consider. As of this morning, we have 4 applicants for the custodial positions out of the 80 needed. Teacher building subs, you had that conversation earlier. The budget calls for 36. We're very concerned there's not going to be a deep enough sub pool where we can call them in as needed. So within the task force recommendations, it was actually making a commitment for 2 teacher subs to be assigned per building. Again, it's that potting issue. We cannot have a pool of subs typically the way it always was, where you called in to go to the high school today, and tomorrow you go to an elementary school, and the next day you go to another elementary school, and on the 4th day you go to the middle school. And now we're starting to cross-pollinate across all the various potting that's been talked about. So the proposal was to have assigned building subs. We're looking at having a need of 36. As of right now, we only got 26. Teachers assistants, same deal. We're looking at about 14 or 15. Bus monitors, as I mentioned, we're going to need 30 more than what we currently have. The lunch aides at the elementary level, if all the students are staying in their classrooms to effectively get the lunches distributed properly in a timely manner and the support of that versus having one person in a cafeteria where the students come through a line where they swipe their cards in order to receive their lunches, etc. Ms. Machado is asking for 65 more support personnel. We're talking over 100 staff in those categories. We have 16 applicants in so far. So the logistics of staffing is a problem, and the funding, those costs are a problem. There's a lot of detail embedded, but I think I hit the highlights of the facts of what we're confronted with. And I just wanted to let you know that we are ramping up, trying to be prepared to open. And as soon as we get state guidance as to how much money will be available, and hopefully not have any money cut from our local budget, because if they try and do what they did in June, they may cut our local budget $1.7 million and say you have an opportunity to get the $1.7 million out of the CARES Act money, which then renders us dead in the water on having any funding to contribute against these expenses that are on the table for you this evening. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We're doing the best we can with the resources we have, but the level of expectation that's under the guidance as the 13 subcommittees analyzed those guidances, and this is what they've come up with their work. And I want to say thank you to all the members that were on those subcommittees that were able to pull together this roster of items needed in order to safely open our schools. They did yeoman's work, and we really appreciate their contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrucci. So without that money and without a promise for that money soon, all public schools will not be opening at the end of August. I don't see how it could happen. The money that was given to the state a while ago by the feds, I think it was, how much was it? 30-something billion?
I believe the state of Rhode Island got $1.2 billion out of that stimulus package. And they've right now committed the $41 million that was the first release that helped offset the state aid in June, and another $50 million that they've announced, of which Warwick is going to get $1.7 million. So that's about $90 million to schools that I'm aware of out of the $1.2 billion in state funding received through the CARES Act. And clearly, I believe it's a concern of the state about how to balance the budget. I'm hearing they got about an $800 million hole with the loss of state income taxes that are not being paid by folks that are unemployed. And of course, the closing of the casino, which was a significant revenue stream for the state of Rhode Island. So I understand the quandary they're in. It's a very deep hole. And so that's why we have to wait to see where they're going to go. And I think if we all watch what's happening at the federal level, we'll have a pretty good idea of when we might hear something. And if they punt that until September, we may not get any budget direction until September. And so watch what happens at the Fed level and then look forward to instructions thereafter.
It makes you wonder why they would hire a consultant for $1.25 million to help with our plans. Really makes you wonder. I'm not sure what that was about, but should have gone to education, to actual education. I would move approval.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. Discussion?
Madam Chair, so why are we moving approval
Wait a
on?
minute.
No, Mr. Cornell can go.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. Go ahead.
Why are we moving approval on?
To
That we
accept
this report?
To accept the report that was.
Okay,
That
so
a
we're
lot
not
of
taking any
people put a
budget
lot of work
action.
into.
So we're not taking any budget action tonight regarding this?
No, we have no ability to take any budget.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Mr. Testa?
Thank you. Mr. Ferrucci, when you deliver these things, you should dress in all black and you should put a black background too, because you're like Darth Vader. But I understand the report. I get it. A couple of questions. When you talked about the cleaning of the high school classrooms, you know, when kids leave the room, I thought part of our plan was going to be the teachers were going to move and not the kids. Was that not at the high school level?
I would defer that to Mr. McCaffrey, but I just wanted to state from a cleaning perspective, we did that the 80 people here, 80 staff members are being hired. They may be under the impression that's the strategy of what we're attempting to do. So I just want to make sure that's clear, but I'll defer to Mr. McCaffrey on the reality of what's happening at the high school. Bill?
Sure. Your question, Mr. Testa, you want to repeat that?
I thought that, well, Mr. Ferrucci was talking about how many extra personnel we need just for cleaning, because he described as the students change classes, you got to go in there and disinfect the classroom. But I thought at our meeting last month, our plan was going to be where the teachers would move from class to class and not the students.
The high schools are different from the middle school. The middle school is stable pods where the teachers would be moving from pod to pod. High schools, the students will be changing classes based on the guidance from RIDE.
So, all right, so it's just that okay, I follow that now, thank you. And I noticed in some of Tony, in page 2 of 2, where the personal protection equipment, it calls for some face shields and some plexiglass dividers. Were those mostly for special ed populations?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question on the lunch aids, why we needed so many of them. But I think the larger point that I'll make is every district's in the same boat. Nobody has the money to pay for this. So you kind of have two choices. Don't open schools at all, do nothing, or open schools. So I don't know how this plays out, but we've got to educate our kids and we've got to educate them well. And political gamesmanship aside, you know, there's a large part of me that says, open the damn schools. Here we go. We're going to go. We don't have the money. Then every city and town is going to have to do this. They're going to run a deficit. They're going to throw it on their city or town. Who's going to throw it on the state? Who's going to throw it on the federal government? So somebody is going to be acting here to put money into the states to fund this. You know, this isn't I'm sure there are some people that look at this as maybe we can completely destroy public education now and come up with this, God only knows what harebrained scheme will come up with. But, you know, we owe it to our students to do the best job that we possibly can, however that looks, to go forward. And not that we have to hope. We don't, you know, we're not like quoting and hoping here, but we've got a responsibility to those 82 or 8,400 kids in this district and their families. We just have to hope that the people sitting in the state houses and in DC get it. I mean, they can't be that stupid. I don't think most of them are.
But they can't.
Yeah, it's impossible. Some of them are, because I see it. But I do want to thank you and all those people who participated in these various subcommittees, because this was kind of Herculean work here that was done in such a short period of time. And I'm sure it's far from perfect, but you know, you never reach perfection. You strive for it. And Vince Lombardi said, you strive for perfection, you'll grab excellence along the way. So I want to thank everybody who participated, because this was a lot of work, and you know, we're gonna see what happens. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. Anyone else? Good. There being none, I'd also like to thank everybody. I was on a couple of the committees and people did amazing work on these committees. And thank you, Mr. Ferrucci and Superintendent for pulling this all together. It was no small task, as Mr. Testa said. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. Number 8, discussion action, contract award, non-public textbooks, open purchase order. Mr. Ferrucci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't sure if Dr. Cecil was going to be here this evening. That's why my name's on it. But I would defer to Dr. Cecil if she wanted to make a comment.
We voted on this last meeting.
Last week was Follett. This one's the Amazon. We
Oh,
only
okay.
did one.
So same thing. We just need the PO so we can order books, which we're just sent out our first Follett order, and we have a couple of books we're gonna order through Amazon.
And this is for the private and parochials,
Yeah,
correct?
for the non-publics. Yep.
I move approval.
Second.
Discussion?
Madam Chair, I have one question. So Dr. Cecil, is this in addition to the 30,000 that we approved? So we're spending 40,000, or is this a drawdown on the 30 that we appropriated?
The budget is 40,000, and so I split it 30 to Follett and 10 to Amazon.
Okay, I follow you. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you very much. Number 9, discussion action, contract award, technology, community instruction, mobile hotspots. Very concerning. Mr. Ferrucci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the tail end of the spring. The school committee accepted hotspots and authorized the distribution out into the community to help folks get access to our virtual and distance learning programs where they may not have been serviceable previously. That whole undertaking was because everybody thought it was a short duration and they were given gratis at the time, and Mr. Alexander had acknowledged that. Now that the new school year is coming in, I think we've raised this red flag. A lot of the things that were free, those vendors are now saying we've got to charge you for them because it's going to be for the school year, et cetera. We have 100 hotspots and it's $60 a month per hotspot. And so technology is asking that we authorize the hotspots for a purchase order of $60 per device. I'm requesting that the PO be a $72,000 PO, which would be the whole year, so that the folks would have access for the instruction over the course of the summer. We may not spend all of that. They will get activated as we need, but I just need the overall authorization. Currently, it was not budgeted for the current year, but with our pursuit of purchasing the Chromebooks through the $1.2 million grant, we are able to free up about $150,000 in the technology hardware line because we had budgeted that for possibility of doing a lease. And so I'm saying that the $72,000, if we expend all of it, would be able to come out of that $150,000 hardware line. I spoke with the new tech director, Mr. Taylor. He's fully aware of these types of issues. And so he'll manage this cost as efficiently and as wisely as possible. So I think it's going to be, no matter what we do, whether all the kids come back or not, it's back to that same point of we got to provide that virtual experience or distance learning whenever the need arises. And that's part of the infrastructure of being able to provide for the community as a whole. So thank you.
I am completely opposed to this $72,000 appropriation for hotspots. I think it's an incredibly expensive venture. This is through T-Mobile. And I would hope that Mr. Taylor, Dr. Taylor, our new technology director, would look into this and see what our options are, because this is just too rich. And you can do better, most likely, with another company. And I think we need to look at all our options before, in my opinion, before we authorize this kind of money being spent for hotspots. $60 a month is a good amount of money for what it is. Does anybody else want to speak on this?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I may, Mr. Ferrucci, if we just delayed this until our August meeting, is there a detrimental impact on anything? I mean, hotspots are not something that.
I don't know to what extent that the students are having access currently. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I don't know that level of information. I see Dr. Cecil's.
Dr. Cecil?
Yeah, I had experience with this because of the homeless, the McKinney-Vento families. And I can tell you, I spent $50 per person per phone to add 10 gigabytes of hotspot data to their phones. And that did not last. That was just like for a couple of weeks. So not even a couple of weeks. So it's very expensive. So I think this price probably isn't a bad price, but I can tell you moving forward, there are going to be families when we do have to go to distance learning who are not going to have access. They're just not. And if the district is not providing it, I can only, with my grant money, pay for McKinney-Vento families, but not for the others. But luckily, I was able to take care of those families until we got this hotspot in.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Cecil. Ms. Cobb.
I recently researched hotspots, and that's about the average price. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Adams.
Do we still have the hotspots that were provided to us when March by T-Mobile? Are they still in our possession, or did we return them?
No,
Some with families and some are in the school building.
I'm sorry, Ms. Backus. I was going to say that we still have the hardware, the device. This is just the service to contact the internet. So the internet service was provided gratis from March through June. And now they're saying they need to be compensated beginning July for having access. We will hold on to the hardware. That's not going anywhere. That's our property.
Okay. Well, the only reason why I ask is because I would be concerned about getting those 100 hotspots if getting the actual hardware was on timetable. If it's the service, I'm not as concerned because that's just an on switch wherever their end is. But in terms of paying for July, I don't really know how we go about it. If any of them were really used, but in terms of going forward, I would also support vetting other areas to see if they would give us a better deal, considering of how public school district and the amount of hotspots that we would be taking on.
Mr. Ferrucci, if I may, so Dr. Cecil, to your point, I think we have to provide these to those families that need them. So the question isn't that, the question is timing. So if Dr. Taylor wants to come in, he wants to do a little research, he'd have to hit the ground running on this. But I think we would just have to know what our drop dead date is before we have to make a decision, so we could have whatever it is we're going to do. If we're going to change them, I don't know if we have to, if we don't go with T-Mobile, then we have to return the physical devices and we have to get new devices. So, I mean, I have no problem leaving it up to Dr. Taylor. I just think that we have a small time window here, and I'm not opposed to him looking at it to see if we can get a better deal. But at some point, we're going to have to do something, because we are going to have to, we are going to be doing distance learning regardless of the environment, right? If it's the hybrid model, we're doing distance learning on the off days. And if we're full distance, well, you know, it's the same thing. So I have no problem just delaying it. So Madam Chair, I don't know if that's okay with you. We can just delay it until August, and that's what, 2
That
weeks
would be
away.
prudent, Mr. Testa. I actually just heard from somebody who's paying $40 a month for a Verizon hotspot. So I don't know what that includes. But
Madam Chair?
yes.
So are they are they requiring for us to pay for the month of July? So do we have to at least do 6,000 for July?
Mr. Ferrucci? I
My-
think we can hold off till the 11th of November.
My particular position has been, Mr. Adams, throughout the whole district, and the directors have been told this time and time again, that they cannot obligate Warwick Public Schools to an expenditure after the fact. So it's beholding to T-Mobile to chase us for the money if they continued the service without having a properly authorized school committee approved purchase order. I would fight that fight with T-Mobile. Like I said, the only question I can't answer this evening is Mr. Testa's question is, what's the immediate impact of how many students are actually relying on this? If we were to tomorrow say we're not doing it and they just flip the switch, I don't know who gets called and how many people may be calling. That's the piece I don't know. But I'll defend July 1st. You didn't have a legitimate purchase order. You shut the thing off in July 1. And Mr. Alexander should have had it on the school committee docket for early June so that we would have continued if that was the case.
You're absolutely right. And I'll stand with you, Mr. Ferrucci. And I think we can easily wait until August 11th. And in the meantime, I know Mr. Taylor will look into other options and solutions. I'm not saying at all that we don't provide this to families. I'm just saying that we explore the technology that's available and the cost when buying in bulk. So we will hold that for the 11th. Discussion action, contract award, technology, tech repair parts. Mr. Ferrucci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've received back most, if not all, of the Chromebooks that have been distributed that needed repairs, etc. The tech guys have gone through. They made a laundry list of all the parts they need to fix what's in hand, plus also get additional parts getting ready for opening of school. It's been pretty well vetted. You have a purchase order in front of you for $42,900, and there's a complete roster of stuff that it's purchasing, and we seek your approval. This one I do support this evening.
As do I, and I move approval.
Second.
Discussion. Anyone? I think it makes sense, and we need to do it. They're outlined, so all in favor?
Aye.
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 The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you very much. In accordance with school committee policy, administration will be presenting those expenses ranging from $1,000 to $4,099 as a consent agenda item. If a school committee member wishes to address any individual item noted, they may do so by referencing the index number of a particular document for an individual item to be removed from the consent agenda and to be addressed separate and individually from the agenda. This time we have discussion action contract awards 1 through 4. I have a question on number 4. Tech Central registration absence letters. And I don't think we need to remove them. I'm just curious as to what they are and how they work.
My understanding is that there's standard letters that they want to have the system generate, and it's a customization to create that expediency that's beyond our capabilities and or our access. And so, oh God, I was going to say Amy. I know by first name, I forget her.
Nero?
Yes. It was her request that this special project be taken care of to make central registration more efficient for the families that are registering. Because our electronic registration is going off so well. We're very reliant on its process.
Oh, fantastic. That's good to know. Anyone else have anything they want to remove? There being none, I move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Motion is approved. Item L, future meetings. School Building Subcommittee meeting, Tuesday, August 4th, 2020 at 7:30 a.m. Number 2, Achievement Subcommittee meeting, Wednesday, August 5th, 4 p.m. And number 3, monthly school committee meeting on Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. There being no further business before this committee, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Be safe, everyone.
Thank you. You as well.
Have a good night, everyone.